The mechanic stared at the Vampire King's carriage, dreading the cruel engineer sent to mock her failing town. Out stepped his fat, quiet son, the court's joke, wrapped in velvet and shame. What she didn't know, the prince everyone called useless had a mind sharper than any blade, and he'd just solved in seconds what she couldn't fix in weeks. The steam harvester coughed black smoke for the third time that hour, and Rhea wanted to throw her wrench at it. "Come on, you rusted piece of—" She wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of grease across her temple. The massive machine sat in the center of the town square like a dying metal beast, its gears grinding in a rhythm that made her teeth ache. 3 weeks. She'd been working on this thing for 3 weeks, and it still shuddered like it was about to explode every time someone tried to start it. The harvest season was dying, and with it, the town's only chance to stockpile food before winter. "Any luck?" called Mayor Hendricks from the crowd that had gathered to watch her fail. "Again." "Give me 5 more minutes," Rhea muttered, though she had no idea what else to try. She'd replaced the pressure valves, cleaned the fuel lines, recalibrated the steam distribution system. Everything should work, but it didn't. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Rhea looked up to see a carriage rolling into the square. Not just any carriage, a black lacquered monstrosity with a Vampire King's silver crest gleaming on its side. Her stomach dropped. The exchange engineer. She'd almost forgotten. 2 months ago, the king had promised to send one of his court engineers to help with the failing infrastructure in the border towns. A gesture of goodwill after the last treaty. Everyone knew it was political theater, but Rhea had allowed herself a flicker of hope. Vampire engineers were legendary. They'd built machines that could harness moonlight, weapons that could level mountains. The carriage door opened. A young man stepped out, and the crowd went silent. He was huge, not tall, but broad and soft, his body filling his expensive velvet coat until the buttons strained. His dark hair was neatly combed, his pale face round and gentle. He blinked at the crowd with nervous brown eyes, clutching a leather satchel to his chest like a shield. Someone in the crowd snickered. "That's the engineer?" a woman whispered, not quietly enough. "The king sent his fat son," another voice said. "It's an insult." Rhea's heart sank. She'd heard rumors about Prince Bram, the king's embarrassment, the son he kept hidden in the palace because he was too soft, too weak, too human looking for vampire nobility. Sending him here wasn't goodwill. It was a joke. Prince Bram stood frozen by the carriage, his face flushing as the whispers grew louder. His driver had already climbed back onto the seat, clearly eager to leave. Rhea felt a flash of anger, not at Bram, but at the king, at the crowd, at the whole stupid situation. She climbed down from the harvester and walked over, wiping her hands on her work pants. "Prince Bram?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. He flinched slightly, then nodded. "Igriagajes. You're Rhea Thorne? The mechanic?" "That's me," she forced a smile. "Welcome to Millbrook. Sorry about the reception." His eyes darted to the crowd, then back to her. "It's fine. I'm used to it." The sadness in those words made something twist in her chest. She was about to say something, anything, to change the subject when Bram's gaze shifted past her to the steam harvester. His entire demeanor changed. His shoulders straightened. His eyes sharpened with sudden focus. "That's a Mark 7 harvester," he said, his voice losing its nervous tremor. "Modified with a dual pressure system." "Yeah," Rhea blinked, surprised. "How did you?" "The rhythm is wrong." He walked past her, moving toward the machine with unexpected grace despite his size. The crowd parted, more from shock than respect. "The main cylinder is firing at 23-second intervals, but the secondary is lagging at 27. That's not a mechanical failure. That's a design incompatibility." Rhea hurried after him. "What do you mean?" "The dual pressure system was installed 5 years ago. It's worked fine until someone replaced the primary boiler, yes?" Bram was already climbing the maintenance ladder, his satchel bouncing against his hip. "Probably within the last year." 8 months ago," Rhea breathed. How could you possibly know that? He didn't answer. He was already opening a side panel she hadn't even known existed, his fingers moving with precise confidence over the machinery. The crowd pressed closer, their mockery giving way to confused curiosity. Here, Bram said, pulling out a small copper regulator valve. This is a Model 12 valve. It's standard in newer boilers. But your dual-pressure system was designed for Model 9s, which have a slower response time. Every time the primary system fires, it creates a micropressure spike that the secondary system can't match. Over time, it throws the entire rhythm off balance. Rhea stared at him. That's actually. The solution is simple. Bram reached into a satchel and pulled out a small brass device she'd never seen before, a pressure equalizer with adjustable timing mechanisms. I designed this for mismatch systems. If you install it between the primary and secondary feeds, it will buffer the spikes and allow both systems to synchronize. He handed it to her, and their fingers brushed. His hands were steady, calloused from work, not the soft hands of a pampered prince. Rhea took the device, her mind racing. You made this. I make a lot of things, Bram said quietly. No one usually cares. She looked at him, really looked at him. Behind the nervous exterior and the body that didn't fit vampire standards, there was something else. A sharp, brilliant mind that saw patterns she'd missed. A gentleness that felt like strength, not weakness. Show me how to install it, she said. For the first time since arriving, Bram smiled. It transformed his entire face, lighting up his eyes with cautious joy. Really? Really? And stop looking so surprised. You just solved in 5 minutes what I couldn't fix in 3 weeks. They worked together, Bram explaining each step while Rhea's hands did the installing. The crowd watched in growing silence as the machine's grinding rhythm began to smooth. When Rhea fired up the harvester again, it roared to life with a clean, powerful hum. No smoke, no shuddering, just pure mechanical perfection. The crowd erupted in cheers. Mayor Hendricks pushed forward, beaming. Prince Bram, we're honored to have you. Please, let us prepare a proper welcome. But Rhea saw the way Bram's smile had already faded, the way his shoulders hunched as people pressed close with their sudden praise. The same people who'd mocked him minutes ago. She caught his arm. Actually, I need him at my workshop. We've got a dozen other machines that need his expertise. Bram looked at her with surprise and something else, gratitude. Of course. The mayor nodded eagerly. Whatever you need. As they walked away from the square, Bram said softly, Thank you. I'm not good with crowds. I noticed. Rhea grinned at him. But you're damn good with machines. How long have you been designing devices like that pressure equalizer? Since I was 8, he admitted. My father's court engineers taught me the basics, then locked me in a workshop to keep me out of sight. They didn't realize they were giving me exactly what I wanted. Time to build. Your father's an idiot, Rhea said flatly. Bram laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. Most people are too afraid to say that. I'm not most people. She led him down a side street toward her workshop, her mind already racing with possibilities. And I think you and I are going to do great things together. She had no idea how right she was, or how dangerous those great things would become. Rhea's workshop sat at the edge of town, a converted barn filled with half-finished projects and scattered blueprints. She pushed open the door, and Bram stopped in the doorway, his eyes going wide. This is incredible, he breathed. The space was chaos to most people, but Rhea saw the beauty in it. Prototype water purifiers hanging from the rafters, a mechanical loom in pieces on the main workbench, gears and springs sorted into jars along the walls. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching on metal surfaces and making everything glow. Bram walked to her workbench like a child entering a candy shop. His fingers hovered over a half-assembled clockwork pump, not touching but studying every detail. You're working on automated irrigation. Trying to, Rio admitted, crossing her arms. The concept works, but the timing mechanism keeps jamming after a few hours. Because you're using a single spring drive, Bram pulled out a small notebook from his satchel, already sketching. You need a dual spring system with alternating tension. One wins while the other releases. Perpetual motion within a closed cycle. He drew with quick, confident strokes, and Rhea leaned over his shoulder to watch. The design was elegant, simple, and completely obvious now that she saw it. Why hadn't she thought of that?
"You're brilliant," she said.
Bram's pencil stuttered across the page.
No
one's ever said that to me before. Then everyone you've met is blind. Rhea grabbed the design from his hands.
Come on.
Let's build this before the sun sets. I want to see if it works. They fell into an easy rhythm, Rhea's hands bringing Bram's designs to life, while he explained the theory behind each modification. He talked more when discussing mechanics, his stutter disappearing entirely as he described pressure differentials and gear ratios. For the first time since arriving, he seemed to forget to be nervous. Why did you really come here? Rhea asked as she soldered a connection. Your father sent you as an insult, but you volunteered.
Why?
Bram was quiet for a long moment. The palace is a cage, he finally said. Beautiful, luxurious, suffocating. My father kept me hidden because I'm not what a vampire prince should be. Too soft, too human, too interested in building things instead of breaking them. Sounds lonely. He picked up a small gear, turning it between his fingers. The court engineers would visit sometimes, bringing me broken machines to fix. They thought they were being kind, giving the useless prince something to occupy his time. They didn't realize I was learning from every device they brought.
Studying.
Improving. And your father never noticed you were becoming a genius. He never looked. Bram's smile was bitter. None of them did. To them, I was just the embarrassment they had to hide until they could figure out what to do with me. When this exchange program was proposed, I begged to be sent. I thought maybe in the human territories I could actually be useful. Actually matter. Rhea set down her soldering iron. You matter, Bram. What you did today with that harvester. You saved this town's entire harvest season. That matters. He looked at her with those gentle brown eyes, and she saw the hope and fear warring in them, the desperate need to believe her, and the lifetime of experience telling him not to. Before she could say more, a shadow fell across the workshop doorway. Quite the touching scene, a smooth voice said. Rhea spun around. A tall vampire woman stood in the entrance, wearing the dark uniform of the King's Guard. Her silver hair was pulled back severely, and her red eyes gleamed with amusement. Captain Soren, Bram said, his voice going flat. I didn't expect an escort. Your father was concerned. The woman stepped inside, her boots clicking on the wooden floor. Wanted to make sure you arrived safely. I've been observing from a distance. How thoughtful, Rhea said, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. Captain Soren's smile sharpened. The prince's talents are valuable. It would be unfortunate if anything happened to him so far from home. Her gaze swept over the workshop, lingering on Bram's sketches. Especially now that he's sharing those talents so freely. There was a threat buried in those words, and Rhea felt Bram tense beside her. I should go, Bram said quickly. They've arranged quarters for me at the inn. Thank you for. Today was good. He gathered his satchel and notebook, moving toward the door with his shoulders hunched again, the nervous prince returning to hide the brilliant engineer. But before he left, he pressed something into Rhea's hand. A small brass key. My room. 2nd floor, 3rd door, he whispered. Come tonight. Please. There's something I need to show you. Something important. Then he was gone, following Captain Soren into the darkening street. Rhea looked down at the key in her palm, her mind racing. The way Soren had looked at those sketches. The threat in her voice. The fact that she'd been watching them all day. Bram's genius wasn't as hidden as he thought. And someone didn't want him sharing it with humans. She closed her fingers around the key, already planning. If Bram was in danger, she needed to know why. And she needed to know tonight. Rhea didn't wait until nightfall. The moment the sun dipped below the horizon, She slipped through the inn's back entrance and climbed the stairs to the second floor. Third door. She knocked softly. Bram opened it immediately, relief flooding his face. Thank God. I was afraid you wouldn't come. His room was small but comfortable, though he'd already transformed it into a miniature workshop. Blueprints covered the bed, and strange mechanical components were laid out on the desk in careful rows. What's going on? Rhea asked, locking the door behind her. That captain was threatening you. Not just me. Bram's hands were shaking as he unrolled a large blueprint across the bed. Captain Soren works for Lord Varek, my father's cousin. Varek wants the throne, and when my father dies, he'll have it, unless I'm alive to inherit. But you don't want to be king. It doesn't matter what I want, Bram's voice was urgent. What matters is that Varek knows about my work now. He saw me fix that harvester. He knows I'm not the useless fool everyone believes. Rhea studied the blueprint he'd laid out. It showed a complex energy core, unlike anything she'd ever seen. What is this? My life's work, Bram whispered. A power source that runs on mechanical resonance instead of blood fuel. It could power entire cities without vampire magic, without human suffering. It could make us equals. The implications crashed over Rhea like a wave. Blood fuel was how vampires maintained control. Humans needed it to power their cities, and vampires controlled the supply. A machine that could break that dependence would shift the balance of power across the entire continent. This could change everything, she breathed. Or get me killed. Bram rolled the blueprint back up carefully. Varek can't let this exist. If I succeed, I become too valuable to eliminate. But if I die before it's built... A massive explosion shook the building. Rhea grabbed the desk as the floor bucked beneath them. Through the window, she saw a fireball rising from the center of town, right where the waterworks station stood. No, she gasped. That's the town's entire water supply. They ran. By the time they reached the waterworks, half the building was engulfed in flames. Workers stumbled out coughing, their faces black with soot. The main pump system, the one that supplied water to 3 towns, was completely destroyed. Mayor Hendricks grabbed Rhea's arm. Thank God. We need to shut down the secondary lines before the pressure blows the whole system. Rhea was already moving, Bram close behind her. They ducked into the control room where pipes rattled and steam hissed from a dozen cracks. The pressure gauges were climbing into the red zone. Manual shutdown. Rhea shouted over the noise. We have to release the pressure before. Wait! Bram was staring at the wreckage of the main pump, his face pale. This wasn't an accident. He knelt beside a twisted piece of metal, picking it up carefully. This is a nightshade detonator. Vampire military tech. It's designed to superheat water into explosive steam. Rhea's blood ran cold. Someone bombed the waterworks. Someone who knew exactly where to place it for maximum damage. Bram's voice was shaking, but his hands were steady as he examined the mechanism. The blast pattern is too precise. They wanted to cripple the system without destroying it completely. They wanted... He stopped, his eyes widening. They wanted us here, Rhea finished. A hissing sound came from above. Rhea looked up just in time to see another detonator stuck to the ceiling pipe, its indicator light blinking red. Run! Bram grabbed her arm and yanked her toward the door. They burst outside just as the second explosion ripped through the control room. The shockwave threw them both to the ground, ears ringing. When Rhea lifted her head, she saw Bram lying a few feet away, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. But his eyes were alert, focused on something in the shadows beyond the burning building. A figure in a dark cloak stood watching them. Too far to see clearly, but Rhea caught the gleam of red eyes before the figure turned and vanished into the night. They're not even hiding anymore, Bram said quietly, pulling himself to his feet. He offered Rhea his hand. Varek's assassins. This was a message. Next time, they won't miss. Rhea took his hand, letting him pull her up. Despite everything, despite the fear she saw in his eyes, his grip was strong. Then we don't give them a next time, she said. We find out who they are and stop them first. How? Rhea thought of the detonator, the vampire military tech, the old battlefield ruins. That's where they get scrap from the war. If someone's using vampire explosives, they might have left a trail. Bram looked at the burning waterworks, then back at her. That's dangerous. So, is staying here? Rhea squeezed his hand. You said that power core could change everything. Then let's keep you alive long enough to build it. For a moment, Bram just stared at her. Then he nodded.
Tomorrow, he said.
We go tomorrow. Neither of them noticed Captain Soren watching from Ian's upper window, a smile playing at her lips as she wrote a quick message and tied it to a raven's leg. The hunt was beginning. They left before dawn, when the town was still sleeping and the roads were empty. Rhea had packed supplies while Bram gathered his tools and carefully wrapped the blueprint of his power core. Nobody questioned them leaving. The waterworks explosion had everyone distracted. The battlefield ruins lay 15 miles south, through dense forest and forgotten trenches where humans and vampires had fought their last major war 20 years ago. Rhea had only been there once, scavenging parts for a project. The place had felt haunted, heavy with old death. Tell me about the detonator, Rhea said as they walked along an overgrown trail. Morning mist clung to the trees, making everything look ghostly. Bram adjusted his pack, his breath coming a bit harder from the pace. Nightshade detonators were discontinued after the war. Too unstable. The military was supposed to destroy the remaining stock, but he shrugged. Things have a way of disappearing into the black market. So, whoever planted that bomb had access to old military supplies. Or knows someone who does. Bram paused to catch his breath, leaning against a tree.
I'm sorry.
I'm not. I'm not built for hiking. We're not in a hurry, Rhea lied, though every instinct screamed that they were running out of time. She pulled out a water flask and handed it to him. Rest for a minute. While Bram drank, Rhea studied the forest around them. Too quiet. No birds, no animals. Just the whisper of wind through dead leaves. Can I ask you something? Bram said suddenly. Why are you helping me?
You barely know me.
This puts you in danger. Rhea considered the question. Yesterday morning, I was ready to give up on that harvester. Ready to admit I wasn't good enough to fix it. Then you showed up and solved it in minutes. Not because you wanted to show off, because you genuinely wanted to help. She met his eyes. The world needs more people like you, Bram. Not fewer. He looked away, but not before she saw the emotion in his face. My father would say that's weakness. Caring about helping people. Your father's wrong about a lot of things. They continued walking, the trail descending into what had once been supply trenches. Rusted rails still ran along the ground, and collapsed supply carts sat rotting in the undergrowth. The deeper they went, the more debris they found, shattered weapons, broken armor, the metal skeletons of war machines. Bram had stopped, staring at something ahead. Do you smell that?
She did. Oil.
Fresh oil. They moved more carefully now, following the scent to a clearing where old supply tunnels opened into the hillside. Someone had been here recently. There were fresh footprints in the mud, and a makeshift camp showed signs of recent use. They're storing something here, Rhea whispered, kneeling beside a crate. She pried it open carefully. Nightshade detonators. At least 24 of them, packed in straw. We need to leave, Bram said urgently. Right now. If they come back. Wait, Rhea spotted something else, a shipping manifest half buried in the mud. She grabbed it, scanning the faded writing. These came from Fort Blackstone. That's a vampire military installation. In Lord Varric's territory, Bram added grimly. This is his operation. A branch snapped behind them. They spun around to find Captain Soren standing at the clearing's edge, flanked by 2 other vampires in dark cloaks. All 3 had weapons drawn. How convenient, Soren said, smiling. The prince and his pet mechanic, wandering right into our storage depot. Rhea's hand found the wrench at her belt. You're working for Varric. Lord Varric appreciates talent. Soren stepped closer. He also appreciates eliminating threats. The waterworks bombing was just the beginning, Prince Bram. By the time we're done, every infrastructure failure in these border towns will be blamed on your incompetence. Your father will have no choice but to recall you in disgrace. And then I'll conveniently die on the journey home, Bram said quietly. Accidents happen, Soren's smile widened. But since you've discovered our little operation, I'm afraid we'll have to move up the timeline. Can't have you telling anyone what you found. The two cloaked vampires moved to flank them. Ria's mind raced, calculating distances, exits, possibilities. They were outnumbered and outmatched. But then Bram did something unexpected. He pulled out a small device from his pocket, one of his inventions, and threw it at the crate of detonators. "Run!" he shouted. The device wasn't a bomb. It was a harmonic resonator designed to vibrate at specific frequencies. When it hit the crate, the detonators began reacting to each other, their unstable mechanisms triggering a chain reaction. Ria didn't wait to see what happened. She grabbed Bram's hand and they ran, crashing through the underbrush as the clearing behind them erupted in chaos. The explosion wasn't massive. Bram had been careful, but it was enough to scatter the vampires and destroy the evidence. They didn't stop running until they reached an abandoned supply tunnel carved deep into the hillside. Inside, they collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. "That was insane," Ria panted. "That was necessary." Bram pulled out his notebook with shaking hands. "We know who's behind it now. We know what they're planning. But we need proof that will hold up in court, evidence my father can't ignore. Or," Ria said slowly, "we need to make you too valuable to kill." Bram looked at her. "The power core. If we can build it, prove it works, you become untouchable. Varric can't kill the prince who just revolutionized energy production. It would take weeks, maybe months. Then we'd better get started." The supply tunnel led them deeper into the ruins than Ria had ever ventured. Ancient vampire fortifications gave way to the Iron Graveyard, a vast scrapyard where both sides had dumped their broken war machines after the ceasefire. Massive metal husks rose from the earth like the ribs of dead giants. "We need components," Bram said, studying his blueprint in the dim light filtering through cracks above. Specifically, a resonance chamber from a class 4 walker. They used crystalline matrices that might still be intact. Ria scanned the graveyard. Dozens of collapsed walkers lay scattered across the field, their mechanical legs twisted at impossible angles. How do we know which one's a class 4? The stabilizer gyros. They had a triple ring design. Bram pointed to a massive walker half buried at the far end. That one. They picked their way through the debris field, climbing over rusted armor plating and ducking under fallen weapons. The air smelled of old metal and decay. Ria kept one hand on her wrench, hyper-aware that they were exposed and vulnerable. The class 4 walker loomed over them, its cockpit crushed, but its core systems possibly salvageable. Bram climbed inside with surprising agility, disappearing into the machine's guts. "I can see it." His voice echoed from inside. "The resonance chamber. It's still." An arrow whistled past Ria's head and buried itself in the walker's armor. She dove for cover as 3 more arrows followed, fired from different directions. "Bram, we've got company." Cloaked figures emerged from behind the wrecked machines, 5 of them, moving with predatory grace. Assassins. Real ones this time, not just Soren making threats. Ria rolled behind a piece of broken armor as another arrow struck where she'd been standing. Her mind raced. 5 trained killers versus a mechanic and a prince who could barely run a mile. The math wasn't good. "The walker," Bram's voice called from inside. "Can you reach the auxiliary power coupling? 3rd panel from the left." "Are you insane? This thing hasn't moved in 20 years. Trust me." An assassin vaulted over her cover, blade drawn. Ria swung her wrench, catching him across the jaw. He stumbled back, surprised, and she used that moment to sprint for the walker's exterior panel. Her fingers found the coupling, a massive plug covered in rust and corrosion. "Got it," she shouted. "Pull it straight out, then jam it into the emergency port below." She wrenched the coupling free and slammed it into the lower port. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the walker shuddered. Ancient gears groaned to life. The entire machine shifted, its massive frame starting to rise. Bram was hot-wiring a war machine. The assassins hesitated, confusion breaking their formation. That hesitation cost them. The walker's legs deployed with grinding screeches, one massive foot slamming down and forcing the assassins to scatter. The cockpit glass was shattered, and through it, Rhea could see Bram hunched over the controls, his face tight with concentration. "Get inside," he yelled. Rhea ran, hauling herself up the walker's leg as it took another lurching step. An assassin grabbed her ankle, but she kicked back hard, her boot connecting with his face. She scrambled into the cockpit just as Bram triggered the walker's defensive systems. A pulse of electromagnetic energy rippled out from the machine, shorting out weapons and disorienting anyone nearby. The assassins fell back, clutching their heads. "How are you doing this?" Rhea gasped. "Emergency power only. We've got maybe 2 minutes before it dies." Bram's hands moved over controls that shouldn't work, jury-rigging systems with the speed of desperation. "Hold on." The walker took 3 more steps before one of its legs gave out, the ancient metal finally surrendering. They crashed down hard, the impact throwing them both against the cockpit wall. But the fall bought them what they needed, distance from the assassins and a direct path to an exit tunnel. They crawled out of the wreckage and ran, Bram clutching a glowing crystal matrix he'd torn from the walker's core. Behind them, the assassins were regrouping, but they'd lost the element of surprise. As they plunged into the tunnel, Rhea heard one of them shout in frustration. But another voice, cold and commanding, cut through the chaos. "Let them go. Lord Varric wants to know where they're heading." Rhea and Bram ran until the tunnel opened onto a hillside miles from the graveyard. They collapsed in the grass, chests heaving. "That was incredible," Rhea said when she could breathe again. "You piloted a dead war machine." Barely. Bram held up the crystal matrix, its inner facets still glowing faintly. "But we got what we needed. This is the heart of the power core. With this, we can actually build it." "They let us escape," Rhea said quietly. "Did you hear? They're tracking us." Bram nodded, his expression grim. "Then we need to find somewhere they can't follow. Somewhere we can work without interruption. The capital, the workshop guild, could protect us. Or they could hand me over to maintain peace with my father." Bram looked at the crystal in his hand, then at Rhea. "But it's our best option. We need to try." They stood, exhausted and battered, and began the long walk toward what they hoped would be sanctuary. Neither of them saw the ravens circling overhead, following their every move. The night train to the capital was half empty, which suited them fine. Rhea had traded her last silver watch for 2 tickets, and they'd boarded through the rear car to avoid attention. Now they sat in a private compartment, the rhythmic clacking of wheels on rails the only sound between them. Bram hadn't spoken since they'd left the station. He sat by the window, staring out at the darkness rushing past, the crystal matrix cradled carefully in his lap. "You should rest," Rhea said. "We won't reach the capital until dawn." "I can't." His voice was soft, hollow. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those assassins. I keep thinking if you'd been slower, if that arrow had been a few inches to the left." But it wasn't. This time, he finally looked at her, and the fear in his eyes was raw. "I've put you in danger, Rhea. Real danger. Maybe you should stay in the capital. Let me face the guild alone." "Absolutely not. You don't understand what they'll do if they catch us. Varric doesn't just kill people. He makes examples of them. Public executions, displayed for days as warnings." Bram's hands were shaking. "I've lived with this fear my whole life, always knowing that I was one mistake away from being eliminated. But you had a life before me. A safe life." Rhea moved to sit beside him, taking one of his trembling hands in hers. "Safe and small. I fixed machines in a border town and dreamed about building something that mattered. Then you showed up and suddenly I'm part of something that could change the world. You think I want to go back to safe. I think you should want to stay alive. Then help me do that by letting me help you." She squeezed his hand. We're partners, remember? You design it, I build it. That's how this works. Bram was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to talk. When I was 12, my father hosted a ball. All the noble houses attended, showing off their children, strong, beautiful, perfect vampire heirs. My father kept me locked in my room, but I could hear the music, the laughter. I pressed my ear to the door and listened to a world I'd never be part of. He took a shaky breath. One of the servants felt sorry for me. She unlocked the door, just for a moment, so I could see. I walked to the top of the stairs and looked down at all those perfect people dancing. And my father, he saw me. The look on his face, not anger.
Disgust.
Like I was something rotten that had crawled into his beautiful party. Rhea felt her throat tighten. He didn't punish me, Bram continued. That would have required acknowledging I existed. He just had the servant dismissed, and the lock reinforced. I spent the rest of the night listening to them celebrate, knowing I would never be celebrated, never be wanted, Bram. And the worst part? His voice cracked. I believed him. I believed I was the problem. Too soft, too weak, too wrong to deserve love or respect or even basic dignity. He looked at her, tears shining in his eyes. Until yesterday. Until you looked at me like I was someone worth knowing. Rhea pulled him into a hug, feeling him shake against her. He was so much bigger than her, but in that moment, he felt fragile as glass. You listen to me, she said fiercely. Your father is a fool and a coward. You are brilliant and kind and exactly what this world needs. And I swear to you, I will not let Varek or anyone else take you away. Bram pulled back, wiping his eyes. How can you be so sure? Because I've seen what you can do. That power core you're building? It's not just about energy. It's about hope. About proving that we don't have to keep fighting, keep suffering, keep living in fear. You're going to change everything, Bram. I know it. He managed a weak smile. You have a lot of faith in a fat prince who hides in workshops. I have faith in my partner, she grinned. Besides, you hotwired a war machine today. That was the most impressive thing I've ever seen. That was desperation and luck. That was genius under pressure. Own it. For the first time since the attack, Bram's smile reached his eyes. Thank you, Rhea. For everything. The train began to slow as the capital's lights appeared on the horizon. Massive towers rose against the dawn sky, their windows glowing like stars. The Workshop Guild's headquarters stood at the city's heart, a fortress of knowledge and innovation. They gathered their things, preparing to disembark. Rhea felt a flutter of hope. The guild had protected inventors for centuries. Surely they would help. But as they stepped onto the platform, Rhea saw a familiar figure waiting by the gate. Captain Soren, flanked by guild officials in formal robes. Prince Bram, Soren called out sweetly. What a relief to find you safe. Your father has been so worried. These gentlemen from the guild have agreed to ensure your protection. The guild officials approached with apologetic smiles, but their hands moved to restrain Bram. Rhea's heart sank as she understood. The guild was going to hand him over. Rhea didn't think. She just moved. Her fist connected with the nearest guild official's jaw, and in the chaos that followed, she grabbed Bram's arm and ran. They crashed through the crowded platform, weaving between confused passengers as shouts erupted behind them. The service exit, Bram gasped, pointing to a maintenance door. They burst through it into a maze of underground tunnels that serviced the station. Behind them, boots thundered in pursuit. Rhea pulled Bram through the darkness, her mechanic's knowledge of infrastructure guiding them through pipes and cables until they emerged in the warehouse district. Where now? Bram panted, leaning heavily against a wall. Rhea's mind raced. They needed somewhere remote, defensible, with power and supplies. Then she remembered. The lighthouse. The old one on Beacon Cliff. It's been abandoned for years, but the workshop beneath it should still have tools. How far? 5 miles north. Can you make it? Bram straightened, determination replacing exhaustion. I'll make it, They stole a delivery cart and rode it to the cliff's edge, abandoning it in the brush before climbing the rocky path to the lighthouse. The structure was exactly as Rhea remembered, weathered stone tower overlooking the sea, with a workshop built into the cliff face below. The workshop was dusty but intact, filled with old equipment left by the previous lightkeeper. Rhea got the generator running while Bram cleared a workspace, his hands already reaching for the crystal matrix. "How long do we have?" he asked. "They'll search the city first. Maybe a day before they think to look this far out." Rhea began gathering tools. "Can you build it in time?" "I have to." Bram unrolled his blueprint, weighing down the corners with rusty wrenches. "The core mechanism is straightforward, but the resonance calibration has to be perfect. If we're off by even a fraction, it could explode instead of generate power." "Then let's not be off." They worked through the day and into the night, their movements synchronized like a dance they'd practiced for years instead of days. Bram would sketch a component and Rhea would build it, her hands translating his vision into metal and wire. When she didn't understand something, he explained with patience and clarity. When he doubted himself, she pushed him forward with fierce confidence. By midnight, the skeleton of the power core sat on the workbench, a sphere of interlocking rings surrounding the glowing crystal matrix. It was beautiful and terrifying, humming with potential energy. "The final calibration," Bram said, his voice hoarse from hours of talking. "This is where it could all go wrong." Outside, the wind had picked up, howling around the lighthouse. Rain began to patter against the windows. And beneath those sounds, Rhea heard something else. Voices. Coming up the cliff path. "They found us," she whispered. Bram's hands froze over the core. "How many?" Rhea peered through a crack in the door. Torches bobbed in the darkness, at least a dozen figures climbing toward them. She recognized Captain Soren's silhouette at the lead. "Too many." Rhea grabbed a heavy pipe from the workbench. "Finish the calibration. I'll hold them off." "Rhea, no. We don't have a choice." She met his eyes. "This is bigger than us, Bram. If that core works, it proves everything you've been saying. It proves you're not useless or broken or any of the lies they've told you. So finish it. Please." Bram stared at her for one agonizing moment. Then he nodded and turned back to the core, his hands moving with desperate precision. Rhea barricaded the door and positioned herself behind it. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. "Prince Bram." Soren's voice called from outside. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Lord Varek is willing to be merciful if you surrender now." "Merciful like he was to the waterworks." Rhea shouted back. "Like he was to everyone you've tried to kill?" "The mechanic girl," Soren sounded amused. "Such loyalty for someone you barely know. Does he know you're just buying him time? Does he know you can't possibly win?" The door shuddered as they began ramming it. Behind Rhea, Bram worked in silent focus, adjusting crystalline nodes with tweezers, checking calculations against his blueprint. Sweat dripped down his face, but his hands were steady.
The door cracked.
One more hit, and it would give. "Bram," Rhea said quietly. "Almost there.
Just need to." "Got it."
The core blazed bright, rings spinning faster and faster until they blurred together. The hum became a roar, power flooding through the workshop and making every metal surface vibrate. "Now what?" Rhea asked. Bram looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw no fear in his eyes. Only fierce determination. "Now we show them what a useless prince can do." He pressed both hands against the core, and the world exploded with light. The energy wave burst from the lighthouse like a second sun. It didn't destroy, it stopped. Every weapon within 100 yards simply ceased functioning. Swords became too heavy to lift. Crossbows wouldn't fire. Even the vampires' supernatural strength faltered, bringing them to their knees as the wave disrupted the blood magic that enhanced their bodies. Captain Soren staggered back from the door, staring at her hands in disbelief.
"What?
What did you do?" Rhea kicked open the broken door. Behind her, Bram stood with his hands still on the core, its light pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He looked exhausted but unbroken, like a weight had finally lifted from his shoulders. "I built something that matters," Bram said quietly. "Something that doesn't destroy. Something that creates." The assassins were retreating now, stumbling down the cliff path. Without their weapons and enhanced abilities, they were just people, confused, frightened people who'd suddenly lost every advantage. But Soren held her ground. "Lord Varek will hear of this. The king will. The king will see proof that his son is a genius." Rhea stepped forward, her pipe still raised. And every human settlement within 50 miles just felt that pulse. "They know something changed. You can't hide this." As if to confirm her words, lights began appearing across the landscape, villages and towns awakening to investigate the phenomenon. In the distance, the capital's towers blazed brighter as people emerged to witness what had happened. Soren's confident mask cracked. She looked at Bram, really looked at him, and Rhea saw the calculation in her eyes. The prince wasn't a joke anymore. He was dangerous. "This isn't over," Soren hissed, before turning and fleeing down the cliff. Rhea watched her go, then turned back to Bram. He'd slumped against the workbench, the core's light dimming to a gentle glow. She rushed to his side. "Are you hurt?" "Just tired," he smiled weakly. "That took everything I had." Over the next hour, people arrived. First, curious villagers drawn by the pulse. Then guild officials, their earlier hostility replaced by awe as they studied the core. Finally, a royal courier bearing the Vampire King seal. The message was brief. "Return home immediately. Your father demands an explanation." Bram read it, then calmly tore it in half. "Prince Bram." The courier looked horrified. "You can't refuse a direct order from." "Tell my father I'm done being his embarrassment." Bram's voice was steady, commanding. "Tell him his useless son just created a power source that will revolutionize both kingdoms. And tell him that if Lord Varek or anyone else makes another attempt on my life, I'll share this technology exclusively with humanity. The balance of power will shift permanently." The courier's face went pale. "He'll see this as treason. He'll see it as leverage." Bram looked at the crowd gathering outside. "I'm not coming home. Not to hide. Not to be mocked. Not to wait for someone to poison my wine. I'm building a new path." After the courier left, Guild Master Torn approached, an elderly human with clever eyes. "That was either very brave or very foolish, Prince Bram. Your father is not known for his mercy." "Then it's fortunate I'm not asking for mercy." Bram gestured to the core. "I'm offering partnership. Humanity needs power that doesn't depend on vampire blood fuel. The vampire kingdom needs proof that innovation matters more than brute strength. This technology bridges that gap. And what do you want in return?" "Safe passage to the sky city of Ethermore. Neutral territory where I can work without interference." Bram glanced at Rhea. "And full guild credentials for my chief engineer." Rhea's heart jumped. "Bram, you saved my life. Multiple times. You believed in me when no one else did." He took her hand. "I'm not building the future without you." Guild Master Torrin studied them both, then smiled. "The guild accepts your terms. And for what it's worth, I think you're exactly what this world needs, someone who builds instead of destroys." 3 days later, they stood on the deck of an airship bound for Ethermore. The floating city gleamed in the distance, its impossible towers held aloft by ancient magic and modern engineering. Rhea leaned against the railing, watching the landscape pass below. "No going back now. Would you want to?" Bram asked, standing beside her. She thought about her small workshop, her quiet life, the safe future she'd left behind. Then she looked at the core prototype secured in the cargo hold, at the partnership papers naming her chief engineer of the New Alliance Initiative, at Bram's hopeful smile. "Not for anything." Bram pulled out his notebook, already sketching new designs. "I have 17 ideas for improvements. And once we're established in Ethermore, we can start mass production. Within a year, we could power every border town. Within 5, maybe entire cities. Within 10, maybe we end the fuel wars entirely," Rhea added. Together, Bram met her eyes. If you'll stay. Rhea thought about the boy who'd arrived in her town as a joke, who'd become a friend, then a partner, and now something more. Someone who made her believe the impossible was just another engineering problem waiting to be solved. Together, she agreed, taking his hand as the Sky City grew closer. Behind them, the old world faded into distance. Ahead, a new one waited to be built, not with blood or violence or ancient hierarchies, but with brilliance, partnership, and the unshakable belief that even the softest hearts could forge the strongest futures. The vampire prince and the human mechanic sailed into the dawn, their shared dream glowing between them like a promise the world would soon be forced to keep. The end.